My name is Christina Bennett. I'm 25 years old, and for a long time, I truly believed I had my life under control. I wasn't rich, I wasn't extraordinary, I wasn't building some dazzling future empire, just a woman with a stable routine, a decent job, and enough peace in my life to convince myself things were fine, stable, predictable. That illusion shattered slowly long before I ever realized what was happening, before the manipulation, before the obsession, before the fear. But every story begins somewhere, and mine started 4 years ago in a stuffy college classroom where the fluorescent lights flickered like they were protesting their own existence. It was a marketing analytics workshop, mandatory for credit, unnecessary for joy. I had arrived early, grabbed a seat near the back, and was fighting the urge to sleep through the professor's monotone lecture about market synergy. I remember tapping my pen on my notebook, trying to stay awake, when a guy slid into the seat beside me and whispered, "Tell me this isn't the most painful class you've ever sat through." I couldn't help it. I laughed, quietly but genuinely. His name was Evan Pierce, 24 at the time, messy hair, warm smile eyes that gave him a gentle, harmless sort of presence. We passed notes like a couple of bored teenagers making fun of how the professor said synergy every few minutes like it was the secret password to enlightenment. When class ended, Evan surprised me by asking if I wanted coffee. I wasn't used to being asked out so directly, especially not by someone who looked genuinely nervous doing it. I said yes, and it was easy, effortlessly easy. We talked about classes, music, how both of us hated pretentious cafes that serve $5 pour-overs like they were holy water. We talked about games we used to play, shows we binged, and our mutual love for simple things, regular coffee, soft hoodies, lazy Sundays. We started dating a week later. The first 2 years felt almost unreal. No fights, no emotional storms, no jealousy. We were normal in a way that felt safe. We weren't fiery passion or dramatic chaos, we were companionship and comfort. Wednesday night dinners at our favorite Mexican place, weekend movie marathons, sharing memes throughout the day, sleeping next to someone who breathed quietly and held me like I was something fragile he didn't want to drop. My friends tease me sometimes, saying no relationship is that easy. "You sure he's not secretly a serial killer?" my sister joked once. But Evan was just Evan. Soft-spoken, thoughtful, always asking how my day was, always showing up when he said he would. And honestly, that simplicity felt like a blessing. With my own family being a bit chaotic, my mom anxious about everything, my sister dramatic about everything else, being with someone who didn't spark conflict felt like medicine. Evan's family situation was distant. His parents separated years ago, and he'd learned to live independently early in life. Meanwhile, my parents adored him. My little cousins treated him like the cool, funny big brother they never had. Sometimes looking back, I wonder if the smoothness should have worried me. Maybe I should have questioned why we never argued, why he always said yes to everything, why his dreams seemed small, just enough to get by, never enough to risk failure. But hindsight is cruel. You never see the fractures in the glass until the entire thing shatters. After graduation, we both stepped into adulthood with cautious optimism. I landed a junior role on a software development team, mostly bug fixing and maintenance. Nothing glamorous, but stable. Evan got a position at a marketing firm. Not high pay, not miserable either. Enough to live comfortably. We decided not to move in together yet. It felt too soon, too risky, and I liked the independence of having my own little apartment. We settled into a routine that for a while I thought would last forever. He'd call me every morning on his way to work. I'd send him photos of my lunch when I tried a new cafe. On weekends, we'd switch between his group of friends and mine. Holidays were calm, birthdays were sweet. And slowly, quietly, little pieces of the future began forming in the back of my mind. The kind of future where you move in together, where the toothbrushes stay side by side, where you don't overthink love because it's simply there, solid, steady. But something changed 2 years in. It started small, like almost every unraveling does. One evening, Evan sat beside me on the couch, distant and strangely quiet, while we watched a show we used to binge together. I asked if something was wrong, and he brushed it off, saying he was tired. But then he started staying late at work. He'd zone out scrolling through his phone, absorbed in videos about success, entrepreneurship, and breaking free from corporate chains. Evan's dissatisfaction grew rapidly. What used to be minor complaints about clients or boring tasks turned into existential monologues about wasting his potential. He started talking about following his passion, building something of his own, becoming his own boss. It surprised me he'd always seemed so grounded, so realistic. Suddenly, he had this hunger in his eyes, something restless and unpredictable. Then he told me he wanted to start his own media company. He showed me a giant 50-page document he'd been working on during his lunch breaks. Business plans, earnings, projections, client lists, strategy, breakdowns. There was a confidence in the way he talked about it, a burning spark I'd never seen before. And looking at him, seeing how much he wanted this, I supported him, fully. Maybe too fully, maybe too blindly. Because the thing about love, real love, is that it makes you think you're helping someone grow. But sometimes without realizing it, you're helping them step onto a path where the fall is steeper, the consequences sharper, and the person you love begins slipping through your fingers 1 inch at a time. And that's where everything began to change. Evan quitting his job didn't happen gradually. It wasn't thoughtful or strategic or even remotely timed well. It happened the way a teenager decides they're ready for freedom spontaneously, emotionally, and without warning. One evening, he came over to my apartment with this strange, nervous excitement buzzing through him. He paced the kitchen, while I reheated leftovers, talking faster than I've ever heard him talk in our entire relationship. He kept saying things like, "I'm finally ready, and I can't waste any more time," and "This is my moment." I half expected him to tell me he got a promotion, or that he had discovered a new passion, or maybe that he wanted us to take a trip together. Instead, he announced, "I quit today." I froze a spoonful of rice halfway to my mouth. You what?" Evan dropped into the chair opposite me, eyes glowing. "I quit. I finally did it. No more boring clients. No more pointless PowerPoints. I'm going to focus full-time on launching my company. This is it, Chris. This is where everything changes." My heart sank, but I didn't show it. Instead, I smiled, because that's what supportive girlfriends do. I told myself love was encouragement, not warnings. I told myself he knew what he was doing. I told myself everything would work out because it had to. He showed me new pages he'd added to his business plan, color-coded spreadsheets, client packages, marketing strategies. They were imaginative, very imaginative, unrealistic but filled with heart. What I should have said was, "It's too soon. You need savings. Start small first." What I actually said was, "I believe in you." And that was the beginning of my mistake. The first month after he quit, Evan looked happier than I had ever seen him. He spent long nights designing logos, editing promotional videos, and setting up a home office in his apartment. He bought a new camera, then another just for backup. He bought a mic, a lighting kit, 2 new monitors, all on his credit cards because he said it was an investment. "Content creation is visual, babe," he explained, unboxing equipment on his living room floor. "My clients need quality. They won't take me seriously otherwise." Clients, plural, even though he still had only one. But the real shift, the one that made my stomach twist, was when he brought up needing help. "I'm thinking of building a team," he told me one Saturday afternoon as we sat on his couch, surrounded by cardboard boxes from Amazon. "You know, to make the business look professional." "A team of who?" I asked cautiously. "People I trust," he said, smiling. "People who get me." That's when he mentioned her, his ex-girlfriend. Not in a romantic way, at least not on the surface. He described her as creative, experienced, talented, with marketing. He said she had worked on campaigns before she knew video editing. She understood branding. She was also apparently very excited about helping him grow. I kept my voice calm, but something about it bothered me. Maybe because he didn't tell me sooner. Maybe because the way he said her name carried familiarity. Or maybe because the next time I visited his apartment, she was already there. Her name was Lena. She was petite, confident, too comfortable sitting cross-legged on his office chair, while Evan assembled a camera rig. She looked at me with a soft smile that somehow felt like a challenge. "You must be Christina," she said in a tone that sounded friendly, but felt like she already knew more about me than she should. "Evan's told me so much about you." I nodded and tried to be polite. Evan introduced 2 other girls he'd invited to join the team. Sophie, a graphic design major, and Elle, a content writer with bubbly energy. They were young, excited broke, and all fully prepared to work in exchange for future shares in the company. They genuinely believed this project was going to change their lives, that he was going to change their lives. I wanted to believe it too, but instead I felt something subtle but cold settling in my chest. A drifting, a distance, a shift I wasn't ready to name. 3 months in, Evan wasn't getting new clients. His credit cards were nearly maxed out. His rent payments were behind. Yet somehow he kept buying things for the company: tripods, lighting diffusers, software subscriptions, a $900 ergonomic chair. He didn't tell me about the overdue bills until the night he broke down crying in my car, hands shaking as he confessed he was 3 months behind on rent. "I'm trying so hard, Chris," he said between shaky breaths. "I just need more time. I can't go back to that stupid job. I can't give up now." My heart squeezed painfully. I remembered the boy who passed me notes in class, the man who held my hand when my grandmother passed away, the partner who used to bring me coffee at work just because he missed me. So I said the words that sealed my fate. "I'll help you, Evan. Don't worry, I'll cover your rent until your business stabilizes." His relief was instant. He hugged me tightly, whispered how much he loved me, how grateful he was, how he'd make it all up to me someday. But gratitude faded quickly. Within weeks, Evan's female team treated his apartment like their hangout lounge. They came late, left late, ate takeout, constantly filmed TikToks about their startup journey, and held endless brainstorming sessions that looked more like gossip circles. Every time I asked Evan if he was planning to charge them for using his space or if he would insist on boundaries, he'd say, "They're helping me build something. We're building a culture." Culture. I was paying for their culture, their workroom, their gym trips, their bonding sessions, their meals, even their Wi-Fi. Every month I transferred the rent money, he'd say, "This is the last month, I promise." But it never was. It became routine, expected. And then Lena the ex became more present. Late-night editing sessions, long gym trips together, inside jokes, whispering, laughing, him staying up late messaging her instead of me. Whenever I gently mentioned how it made me feel, he turned it around on me with an exhausted sigh. "Chris, don't be insecure. She's just a teammate. Why are you making things weird?" Weird. That word echoed in me. Weird. Overreacting. Too sensitive. And every time he'd say it with just enough softness to make me doubt myself. Love makes you blind. Guilt makes you obedient. Fear of losing someone makes you silent. And silence is where everything truly began to fall apart. The shift didn't happen overnight. It crept in slowly, disguised as work team bonding and entrepreneur hustle. But one day I woke up and realized I didn't recognize my own relationship anymore. Evan had changed subtly at first, then sharply. His life revolved around his team, especially Lena. He used to text me good morning before anything else. Now, I'd wake up to see he'd already posted 3 Instagram stories, each featuring some overly filtered gym video or motivational quote with him tagged by Lena and the others. Suddenly, he was a fitness enthusiast. Suddenly, the gym was essential for productivity. Suddenly, he needed to go there twice a day. And suddenly, I wasn't invited. Whenever I tried to join, he always had an excuse. "We're working on content. It'll be boring for you. We're brainstorming afterward." But somehow Lena always just happened to be there too. At first, I convinced myself I was being paranoid, that he was just caught up in the energy of a new project, that I should be proud of him, supportive, understanding. But then the distance grew. Our conversations shrank. Our weekend plans disappeared. And every time I asked him why he was pulling away, he acted like I was accusing him of a crime. "Chris, I'm building a company. You knew this would take time. It's not my fault you don't get the grind. I'm exhausted. Can't we talk about something positive for once?" Positive, as if asking to be acknowledged was negativity. The worst part wasn't the lack of attention. It was how he started treating me like an inconvenience. One night, after days of barely hearing from him, I went to his apartment unannounced, something I rarely did, but loneliness does strange things to your judgment. I brought dinner, thinking maybe we could reconnect at least for an hour. When I arrived, Lena opened the door. Not Evan, not one of the other girls. Lena. She had her hair tied up, wearing workout leggings and one of Evan's oversized shirts. She blinked at me like she didn't expect me to show up, like I was interrupting something. "Oh, hey," she said slowly. "Evan's inside." Inside, in the apartment I paid for. She didn't move to open the door wider. I literally had to sidestep around her to enter. Evan was on the couch, laughing at something on his phone, the ring light still glowing from whatever content they were filming before I arrived. Sophie and Elle were sprawled out on the floor with takeout containers. It looked less like a workspace and more like a slumber party I was intruding on. He glanced up at me with a flicker of surprise, but not the warm kind. "Oh, hey," he muttered, barely lifting his eyes back from the screen. "Didn't know you were coming over." I held up the food I brought. "I thought we could have dinner together." Lena laughed softly under her breath. "We already ate. Team dinner. Productivity boost." I ignored her and looked at Evan. "Can we talk outside?" He sighed dramatically, as if I'd asked him to hand over the deed to his soul. "Chris, I'm in the middle of something." "You're watching TikToks," I said quietly. His entire team stilled. I hated that they witnessed this. I hated that everything between us, private moments, gentle moments, intimate dynamics, were now open to their dissection. "Chris, you're being rude," Evan snapped. "We're working." "You're working," I asked, gesturing to the trash on the table and the pause screen of a video game on the TV. He didn't like that I challenged him. His jaw tightened. Lena leaned back and smirked like she was enjoying the show. That's when something in me broke a little, not enough to leave him, not enough to stand up for myself, but enough to feel something heavy settle inside me, something like grief. The days that followed were worse. He stopped calling altogether. Texts came hours late, short, and dismissive. When I asked to see him, he always had a reason he couldn't. Too busy, too tired, too stressed, too overwhelmed. But online he was everywhere, laughing with the team, taking gym photos, tagging Lena in inside jokes, posting rise and grind stories at 6 a.m. with her in the background. It was like I was dating a ghost, one that still existed, but only where I couldn't reach him. I kept trying to talk to him to understand what was happening, to express how I felt. Each attempt ended in deflection. "I can't babysit your insecurities. This is temporary. You're smothering me." Me, the woman paying his rent, feeding him, cheering him on, carrying the financial weight so he could play CEO. If irony had a taste, it would be bitter. Then came the moment I'll never forget. The moment everything clicked into place and the denial I'd been clinging to finally snapped. It was a Wednesday, our old date night. I'd asked Evan earlier if we could meet up. He left my message on read. No reply. So after work, I decided to surprise him again. I shouldn't have gone. My gut told me not to. Something in me already knew what I'd find. But I needed the truth. I needed clarity, even if it hurt. I arrived at his apartment around 2 p.m. and rang the bell. This time, Elle opened the door. And like before, she wasn't fully dressed, just a sports bra and shorts, as if they'd all just finished some intense workout session. My stomach twisted. "Oh, Christina," she said, startled. "We didn't expect, come in." The apartment was a disaster. Gym bags everywhere, hair ties, half-empty protein shake bottles. The ring light was on again. The backdrop was crooked, and Evan was sitting at his desk also in gym clothes, flushed like he'd been running. Or doing something else. He looked at me with the mix of annoyance and discomfort. "Why are you here?" "We haven't seen each other in almost a week, Evan." And then the moment came, the one that would haunt me. He exchanged a glance with Lena, who was stretching by the window, and then said it with a smirk. "Maybe you should compete for my attention with my female friends." Everyone laughed. Lena, Elle, Sophie, like it was the funniest joke in the world. My heart didn't just break, it fell silent, like it had stopped beating for a moment. I swallowed hard, holding on to the last fragment of dignity I had. "You can enjoy their company," I said quietly, "while I go enjoy my life, after slaving away all week to pay your rent." The room went dead silent. Even the air stopped moving. And for the first time in months, Evan looked at me, not with annoyance, not with superiority, but with shock. I didn't wait for him to recover. I grabbed my bag, turned around, and walked out. He didn't follow, he didn't call, he didn't text. Not until hours later when he messaged, "You embarrassed me. You were disrespectful in front of my team. We need to talk about your behavior." That was the exact moment I realized I wasn't loved. I was used. The weekend after I walked out of Evan's apartment felt like time stopped, not peacefully, but in the suffocating way where every hour stretches into something heavy and endless. I kept replaying the scene in my head, the laughter, his smirk, the way Lena looked at me, like she had already won some competition she shouldn't even have been invited to. I didn't cry. Not that night. Not the next morning. Instead, I sat on my couch in silence, my phone on mute, staring at the wall and wondering how the man I spent 4 years with had turned into someone capable of humiliating me so casually, someone who valued validation from near strangers over the person paying his bills, someone who didn't even try to stop me when I walked out. By Sunday afternoon, the messages started. "Evan, you're being childish. Evan, we need to talk about your behavior. Evan, my team feels uncomfortable now. Evan, you're not supporting me." My behavior, my lack of support, my fault. The deflection would have been impressive if it weren't so predictable. I didn't reply. Not because I wanted to hurt him, because I was done. Something inside me had switched off. Whatever emotional leash he'd had on me had snapped cleanly. But the messages didn't stop. Evan. A real girlfriend would understand the pressure I'm under. Evan. You embarrass me in front of my employees. Evan. Lena said, what you did was toxic and unprofessional. Evan. If you actually cared about me, you'd apologize. I nearly laughed at that one. If he wanted an apology, he should ask himself why none of his so-called employees were paying even a fraction of his rent. And the worst part? It wasn't even anger I felt. It was exhaustion. Deep, bone-heavy exhaustion. So Monday morning, I did the one thing I should have done months ago. I called his landlord. Hi, this is Christina Bennett. I said, my voice steady, even though my hands were trembling slightly. I'm calling to let you know I won't be covering Evan's rent anymore. The landlord sighed softly, like this confirmed something he already suspected. I'm sorry to hear that. Thank you for calling, and thank you for being reliable with payments. That was me, I said quietly, almost embarrassed. Not him. He paused. I know. That pause alone told me everything. Things became real after that. Immediate. Unavoidable. For the first time in nearly a year, the rent money stayed in my bank account. I stared at the balance longer than I should have, feeling something like freedom mixed with guilt. But the guilt was only habit muscle memory of being manipulated. Evan didn't figure out the rent hadn't been paid until his landlord knocked on his door 2 days later. The first text came instantly. Evan, WTF is going on? Why is my landlord here, Evan? Why didn't you pay my rent? Evan, Christina, are you kidding me? This is not funny. Funny. He thought I was joking. I didn't respond. I didn't owe him anything. Not money, not explanations. But when I didn't answer, his messages escalated. Evan, you can't do this to me. Evan, my entire business is based here. Evan, what am I supposed to tell my team? Evan, this is going to ruin everything. Ruin everything. As if I hadn't been subsidizing his dream for nearly a year. As if my money wasn't the only thing keeping the lights on. Then came the threats. Evan, I'll tell everyone what a controlling girlfriend you are. Evan, my lawyer will contact you. Evan, you're legally responsible for my rent. He didn't have a lawyer, and I wasn't responsible for anything. My name wasn't on his lease. I blocked him. Then I blocked the second number he used. Then the third. Then Instagram. Then email. Then the fake accounts he made when he realized I wasn't responding. His friends started messaging me too well, mostly his team. Sophie, why would you sabotage Evan like this? Elle, you're crushing a small business. Lena, wow, didn't think you were this insecure. I blocked them all. But one message stood out, someone I barely knew from Evan's college days. For what it's worth, I get why you left. He's not okay right now. Take care of yourself. That message felt like confirmation that I wasn't crazy. For days, Evan spiraled. I knew because he kept trying to contact me through numbers I didn't recognize. I ignored them all. But part of me still wondered what he was thinking, whether he was scared, panicking, angry, whether he finally realized he'd gone too far. And then came Thursday night. A pounding on my apartment door jolted me awake. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't hesitant. It was the kind of pounding that sends fear straight into your ribs. I checked the peephole and my heart lurched. Evan. His eyes were wild, his hair disheveled. He looked like someone who had been spiraling for days without sleep. I kept the chain lock on and opened the door, just a crack, just enough to see him, not enough for him to enter. Chris, what the hell? He shouted. You ruined everything. His voice wasn't the soft, steady one I knew. It was cracked, sharp, unpredictable. Evan, go home, I said firmly. No. He shoved against the door so hard the chain strained. You can't walk away like this. You owe me. You owe me. I stepped back instinctively, adrenaline flooding my veins. I don't owe you anything, I said louder this time. You need to leave. He reached through the gap with his hand, no grabbed fingertips scraping at my arm like he was trying to pull me closer. His nails dug into my skin, leaving burning red marks. I yanked my arm back. Evan, stop! But he pushed harder against the door, fury trembling through him. You can't do this to me, he screamed. You don't get to just leave. I'm calling the police, I warned, stepping farther back. He kept ranting, raging, banging on the door. It went on for 15 minutes. 15 long, terrifying minutes. When he finally left, I slid to the floor, shaking. My skin burned where he scratched me. My heartbeat felt like it was bruising my ribs. That night I didn't sleep. Instead, I documented everything: the scratches, the bruising, the messages, the timeline, the photographs, the recordings from the door camera. The next morning, I filed a police report. It didn't stop the fear, it didn't erase the memory, but it was the first time since this nightmare began that I felt safe enough to breathe. Just barely. Filing the police report should have brought me peace. That's what everyone told me. My sister said I did the right thing. My best friend Kevin insisted I wasn't overreacting. Even the officer I spoke to told me gently, "You're taking the proper steps to protect yourself." But peace didn't come, because Evan didn't stop. He just changed his methods. At first, it was little things too small to be proof, but unsettling enough to make my stomach tighten. A car idling down the street longer than it should. The sound of footsteps in the hallway outside my apartment around midnight. My phone ringing from unknown numbers before stopping after one ring. I told myself it might be coincidence, that I was imagining it, that trauma was making shadows seem alive. But then Kevin came over one morning after grabbing coffee and asked a question that made my blood run cold. "Krisham, did you know Evan is parked across the street?" I froze. I looked out my window through the narrow slit between the blinds. There he was, in his old silver Civic, just sitting there, staring straight at my building. Not moving, not hiding, just watching. My breath caught in my throat. Kevin immediately stepped in front of the window, blocking the view. "Okay, we're documenting everything from now on." And we did. It didn't take long before his pattern became unsettlingly obvious. 7:30 a.m. He parked near my apartment. 8:15 a.m. He followed my car when I left for work. 9:00 a.m. He sat at the cafe across from my office pretending to scroll his phone. 5:00 p.m. He followed me home. 6:11 p.m. He lingered near the neighborhood park. Every single day. At first, I still tried convincing myself he wasn't dangerous, that he was just desperate and didn't know how to let go. But desperation unchecked and inflamed by entitlement can transform someone. And Evan was transforming. He stopped trying to contact me directly after I blocked every account he used, but new ways kept appearing. A bouquet left at my apartment door with no note. A voicemail from a number registered in another state just breathing. A typed letter slipped under my door that read, "You ruined my life, don't ignore me." My hands trembled when I picked it up. I didn't cry. I just felt cold. A cold that settled deep and didn't leave. I saved everything, Kevin insisted. He created a shared folder where we logged every incident with dates and timestamps. He showed me how to organize evidence like a case file, not a set of random screenshots. "It needs to look consistent," he said, "like a pattern, not assumptions." I didn't know whether to be grateful or terrified that he spoke as if we were preparing for war. The worst part wasn't even Evan. It was the fear that slipped into every corner of my daily life. I stopped going to the gym alone, stopped walking to my car without checking around me, stopped sleeping uninterrupted. Every unexpected noise in the hallway made my heart race. Every unfamiliar silhouette made my breath hitch. Fear became my shadow. One afternoon, I tried to go grocery shopping alone. I only made it halfway down the produce aisle before I saw him standing at the end, staring at me over a row of apples. He didn't say anything, didn't move, just watched. I abandoned my cart and walked straight out the back exit, heart pounding. Kevin found me shaking outside the store. He put his jacket around me, guided me to his car, and said, "This is it. We're confronting him." I wanted to say no, I wanted to be brave, I wanted to pretend I wasn't terrified. But the truth was plain. I couldn't live like this anymore. So that evening, with Kevin and another friend, Maya, standing behind me, I walked up to Evan's parked car outside my building. He flinched when he saw all three of us approaching. His window was halfway down, and his eyes looked glossy, exhausted, unhinged. I took a deep breath. "Evan, what are you doing? Why are you following me?" His voice was small at first, trembling. "Chris, I messed up. I know I messed up. I shouldn't have talked to you that way. You know how much pressure I'm under." Pressure, always excuses. "You need to stop this," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're making me feel unsafe." Tears welled in his eyes instantly, like he was waiting for the chance to look wounded. Unsafe. From me. I would never hurt you. You know that. You know that. You. Kevin stepped closer. You scratched her arm and tried to push through her door. Evan's expression twisted. For a heartbeat, pure anger flickered across his face, but he swallowed it down, forcing himself back into a softer expression. I was emotional, he said. You provoked me. You were cruel, Chris. Just cruel. Cruel. Because I stopped funding his life. Cruel. Because I stepped away when he humiliated me. Cruel. Because I wanted him out of my house. I didn't flinch. If you do not stop following me, I'm going to get a restraining order. He laughed. Actually laughed, a broken, disbelieving sound. A restraining order against me. For what? Wanting to fix things. You're unbelievable. You ruined everything. You took away my home, my business, my team. You can't just walk away from that. Maya crossed her arms. She doesn't owe you her life. His breathing grew irregular, shallow. You can't leave me like this. Chris, you're the only good thing I ever had. I can't survive if you walk away. There it was, the manipulation, the guilt, the emotional noose he used to pull me back every time I tried to leave. But not this time. I'm not responsible for your survival, I said softly. His face contorted pain, anger, desperation colliding all at once. For a moment, I thought he might lunge at me again, but Kevin stepped between us, and Evan shrank back into his car. This isn't over, he muttered, gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles went white. He drove off without looking at me again. And I knew with a sinking certainty that the next step had to be court. The process of getting a restraining order felt like peeling open wounds I was desperately trying to heal. The courthouse was cold, echoing, filled with 2 bright lights and 2 loud footsteps. But I brought everything. The texts, the scratches, the photos, the time logs, the letters, the videos from my door camera, and Kevin and Maya as witnesses. When Evan walked in for the hearing, Lena and Sophie followed him like loyal shadows. Lena gave me a victorious little smirk like she still believed this was about jealousy and not safety. But when the judge played the footage of Evan trying to force the door open, screaming, reaching for me, scratching me as he shoved against the chain, Lena stopped smirking. Evan went pale. His hands shook. His mouth dropped open as though he couldn't believe he was seeing himself. And when the judge looked him dead in the eyes and said, "Sir, you are a danger to this woman," Evan looked like a piece of him finally cracked. He was arrested that afternoon for violating my personal space and making threats. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't even feel relief. I felt tired, bone-deep tired. But for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The day Evan was arrested was supposed to be the ending. That's what everyone told me. "You're safe now," my sister said. "He can't bother you anymore," Kevin insisted. But trauma doesn't disappear just because a judge stamped a piece of paper or because handcuffs clicked around the wrists of someone you used to love. If anything, the days following the court hearing felt like the aftermath of a storm, heavy, eerie, and unsettlingly quiet. I went home to a silent apartment. No banging on the door, no unknown numbers calling me, no shadowed figure sitting in a silver Civic across the street. And it was strange how relief didn't rush in immediately. Instead, what came first was disbelief. I kept expecting him to show up anyway, to send a new email, to create a new account, to call from a friend's phone, to shout from outside my window. For nights, I slept with the lights on. The scratches he left on my arm faded, but the memory stayed sharp. Every time the apartment settled or the floor creaked, my muscles tensed. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped. Healing wasn't the neat, empowering montage people imagine woman escapes danger. Cue triumphant music, fade into a brighter future. No, healing was slow, messy, uncomfortable, full of nights where I questioned my own judgment, my own worth, my own ability to trust. That's why I finally agreed to therapy. The therapist's office had warm lighting and soft chairs that made you feel like you were supposed to sink into them and reveal every secret you'd ever kept. Dr. Flores was calm in a way that wasn't patronizing. She didn't ask sweeping questions. She didn't prod at my pain. She guided me gently like someone helping me walk after forgetting how. "You've been carrying the emotional weight of 2 people for a long time," she said during one session. "Your nervous system is exhausted. That's why you feel so afraid even when you're safe." Safe. I wanted to believe that word again. I told her everything: the first 2 years of peace, the spiraling chaos, the humiliation, the stalking, the scratches, the nights of fear. I told her how guilty I felt for not seeing the signs sooner, how embarrassed I was to admit I funded his life for nearly a year, how angry I was at myself, how numb I felt now that it was over. She listened, really listened. And then she said something I'll never forget. Kindness isn't a flaw. But staying when someone weaponizes your kindness, that is where the harm lives. And you left Christina. You saved yourself. I cried for the first time in weeks. Not because of Evan, because of me. The restraining order took effect immediately. Evan wasn't allowed within 300 feet of me, my workplace, or my building. The officers who handled the case told me violations were taken seriously, and thanks to the court footage and my documentation, my file was, according to one officer, airtight. For the next month, Evan stayed away. No more parked car, no more anonymous calls, no more letters, no more flinching shadows. His company dissolved almost overnight after his arrest. Lena and Sophie moved on quickly. New jobs, new socials, new identities that didn't involve calling themselves a team. Evan's landlord finally evicted him. The last update I heard through a mutual acquaintance who whispered the gossip like it was too sharp to touch was that Evan moved in with a distant cousin across town. He wasn't homeless, he wasn't dying, he wasn't broken beyond repair. He simply had to live life without me carrying it for him. And maybe that was the real punishment. My work was surprisingly supportive when I told them the situation. HR fast-tracked my request to work remote 3 days a week. My manager offered flexibility anytime I needed it. Even my coworkers, most of whom only knew bits and pieces, treated me with quiet respect. But the biggest change came when I started looking for a new apartment. I wanted a place where I never had to check the street first. A building with a lobby and security cameras. Somewhere Evan had never been. Somewhere new, untouched by memories. I toured 5 places before I found it. An apartment with soft morning light, a balcony facing a quiet courtyard, secure underground parking, and a door that wasn't haunted by a fist pounding against it. The day I signed the lease, I stood in the empty living room and felt something I hadn't felt since the beginning of this nightmare. Hope. Pure, undiluted hope. Kevin and Maya helped me move. My sister bought me a housewarming candle. My mom stocked my fridge with homemade food the way she did when I first moved out at 18. And for the first time in a long time, I felt surrounded not by fear, not by manipulation, not by chaos, but by people who wanted nothing from me except for me to be okay. The healing wasn't flawless. There were still nights I woke up sweating, convinced I heard someone at the door. There were moments where cars that looked like Evan's made my pulse spike. There were days where trust felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. But in therapy, Dr. Flores told me healing isn't linear. It loops, spirals, rewinds, and jumps forward. It's not an ascent, it's a landscape. A landscape I was finally learning to navigate. I started going to the gym again, not Evan's gym, a new one. I walked through the aisles of the grocery store without scanning for danger. I sat at cafes without checking the window every minute. And eventually, I even joined a local D&D group because Kevin swore it would help rebuild my faith in humanity through imaginary quests. He wasn't entirely wrong. It helped, more than I expected. I wasn't ready to date, and that was okay. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't rushing into closeness or bending myself to support someone else's dream. I was choosing me, quietly, consistently, carefully. One afternoon, months after everything ended, I got an automated notification from the court system. No violations recorded. Protection order remains active. I stared at the message, letting out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. No violations, no stalking, no messages, no threats. Silence, the kind you can rest in. I'm not naive enough to believe life will always be peaceful, but I've learned that I can survive the storm. I can walk away. I can rebuild. I can protect myself. And most importantly, I can choose better next time. But for now, I'm choosing something even more important. I'm choosing to be whole again. And for the first time in forever, I finally am.